evening, everyone. It is 5 o'clock in the evening on October 11th, 2019, and today we are going to finish up the comparison between the DT1990 Pro and the Ollo Audio S4, both open back headphones, one more than the other. Let's be frank, because the 1990 Pro is semi-open, not fully open back, which I think most people haven't, reviewers, that is, have not been commenting about. Okay, so before we get started into the treble response portion, let's take a quick look at the frequency response, because I think it's important to know where we're, how we're going to start comparing and saying what is and isn't prevalent. So when you start looking at the frequency response chart that's available on Ollo Audio's website, which is a good thing, the first thing you have to understand is that this is their standard, right? This is what they try to achieve based upon their tuning. It doesn't mean that every headphone that you get is going to be exactly like this, but I can say with the two headphones that I do have, both of their headphones, the S4 and the S4R, the frequency response charts that they provide in the box with each headphone is fairly close to the one that is posted on their website. So when we look at the treble region, starting around 3,000-ish and going all the way up to 20,000, we start seeing a kind of a spike, a dip below 8,000 just before, I would say about 7,500 or so, maybe 7,000. There's a slight dip in the S4, and the S4 is the red line. And then a slight increase once again around the 10K region, and then it stays that way, and it kind of smooths itself out when it gets towards the 20,000 region. And by smooth, I mean it starts lowering down. The S4R, which is the closed bag, has a much more obvious hump, where the S4, the open bag, does not. Then we go to the DT1990 Pro. Now, this is a frequency response chart from headphones.com, because Beyerdynamic does not provide a frequency response chart for the 1990 Pro. And you can just guess why they can't, because I have no idea why they feel compelled not to share it. And as you can see, that there is in fact a spike, and a considerable spike, when we start just around about 6,000 hertz. 5,500 and 6,000 hertz, it seems like that's where it starts going. And at 6,000 hertz, it's a sharp incline. So when you get to 7,000, you're already way into the spike. And at right around 7,500, there's the plateau, and it's a giant spike. And then it comes back down immediately, and it kind of comes to a flat response around 8,500, 9,000, and then it goes back up right around, I don't know, because this is not particularly helpful, but probably I would say around 1,500 or so, and then it comes down again. Ultimately, what this means is that, yes, the 1990 does in fact have a treble spike, and it's a noticeable one when you compare it to the treble spike of the S4, where it's not much of a spike. I mean, it's a gentle upward beat here. It's not something that immediately shoots up like it is on the 1990. Having talked about that, let's go to our test playlist. We have 3 songs queued. We have, okay, I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly. I've been told twice that I'm mispronouncing, so I'm fairly certain I'm going to mispronounce again. Scherzo for XWings. And if I pronounce it wrong, those are the 3 pronunciations that I have come up with so far. So maybe there's a 4th one that I got right. That's by John Williams. Then the next one is going to be Flight from the City by Johan Johansson. And then the final one is New Light by Kazuki. As always, we have the 2 headphones plugged into an A/B switch. And that switch itself is plugged into the ADI to DAC from RME. We're going to start each song at negative 30 decibels for each headphone, then we're going to come up from there. At negative 30 decibels, the S4 is very loud, whereas the 1990 is not. And we have to play with the volume and try to match volume as best as we can. All right, so let's start with XWings. Here we go. And by the way, I have the S4 on my head currently. It's very clear, but there's no spike, there's no harshness at all. I'm going to increase the volume because it doesn't sound loud enough for me. I'm now at negative 22 decibels, and now you feel all that energy, the treble region. No harshness at all. You can hear the cymbals or the little triangle bell things that orchestras have. And you can hear them in the background somewhere every once in a while when they come in. Very faint, but you can hear them. It's a nice little detail. There's a bit of a rumble with the brass and the percussion instruments. It's not overpowering at all. You can know that there's substance behind it. There's more than one instrument in a group set. Where the song goes da-da-da-da-da, that harshness, that peakiness, it doesn't exist on the S4. It doesn't pierce the air. It doesn't start hurting. I'm going to increase the volume to negative 20 decibels. And it really does feel like you're sitting in a moderately sized theater listening to this song. And you feel surrounded by it, left and right. Presentation of the song is very good because you hear part of the instruments on the left side and the other set of instruments on the right side. So there is spatial awareness. It's not as if all instruments are playing left and right at the same time. There's a group in the left and there's a group in the right. Extremely, I wouldn't say gentle response, but it's not harsh. You feel the energy in the treble. There's air in there, but there's no peakiness. There's no ear piercingness to the song. So one of the things you'll notice if you listen to this song at high volume is either your headphones can perform or they cannot perform. And what do I mean by perform? I mean, if your headphones are bass heavy, then there's a rumble nature to some of the instruments that's going to overpower the details. If you have a pair of headphones that is conducive to trebleness, to being really peaky, then at high volumes, this thing is going to hurt your ears because of all that energy in the brass instruments and the wind instruments. And with the S4, I don't feel any harshness at all. Now, the S4 doesn't have a tremendous amount of detail. There's not a huge amount of air in this presentation. My go-to, king of soundstage, my go-to headphone that has tremendous detail is the HD800S. And that's so far the only headphone I have heard that produces so much clarity and depth and verticality and soundstage and definition and separation that other headphones struggle to do half of what the 800S can do. As far as the S4 is concerned with this song, it does a very good job in separating the instrument groups, but you can't hear each individual instrument in a group. So for example, if you have the wind instrument group, there are, let's say, 5 players, 5 musicians in that group. You can't hear 5. You hear 1 in concert, right? I mean, that's why it's called a concert. That's good, especially when you don't hear the harshness. But if you want hyper detail and you want to pick out the nuances in the different musician and how he or she is playing their particular instrument, the S4 is not that type of headphone. You'd have to spend a lot more, exponentially more amount of money to get that type of experience. Let's switch to the 1990. All right, I've got the 1990 on my head. I think I've said this before, but the 1990 doesn't have as much sound isolation just sitting on the top of my head as the S4 does. That tends to have a bit more sound isolation because the clamping on that is just a tiny bit more. And on top of that, the ear cups actually sit more on top of my ears, just a little bit more on top of my ears, whereas the 1990s sit around my ears, just barely, but there's a slight difference. All right, so let's restart this song, and here we go. Oh, let me bring the volume down to negative 30. All right, we are at negative 30, and here we go again. So currently, it just sounds a little flat, partly because we're at such a low volume. So let's increase the volume to -20. And at -20, there's that that gets really peaky at -20 decibels. Now let's increase to -15. Now at -15, I'm starting to get some of the detail out. I can't hear individual instruments in a group set, just like with the S4. There seems to be just a tiny bit more air in the presentation with the 1990 than with the S4. That does not, however, equate to wider soundstage. I don't think the soundstage is at all affected by the slight bit more air with the 1990. There's no distortion that I could hear from the bass and the sub-bass. In fact, I would say that the S4 and the 1990 sound very similar to each other. There's a good separation left and right, just like with the S4. Some groups of instruments are playing the left, other groups are playing at the right. But I haven't heard that spatial awareness sort of thing with the triangle instrument being hit. And it feels like it's in the distance. I haven't heard that. So let's stop. Let's go back to about 4 or 5 seconds. I think that instrument came in fairly early in the song. Let me listen for that. I'm going to increase the volume to -13. Yeah, when it goes da 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 da, it starts piercing my ear a little bit. Not particularly comfortable. Yeah, so the triangle instrument comes in right around, I think, 25 seconds. So let's go back to 22 seconds. Let's play it again. Yeah, it's not the same experience with that instrument with the 1990. It sounds really, I don't want to say muffled, but extremely quiet, even at -14 decibels, which is really, really loud. And I'm not quite sure why it's being presented that way. So I'm going to go back to -20, or -22. I'm going to go back to 20 seconds, put on the S4, and listen for that instrument. Oops, I just hit the microphone. I'm sorry. All right, I've got the S4 back on my head. I'm going to bring down the volume to -20 decibels, and let's go from 20 seconds. Yeah, the clarity for the triangle is more. That was a poorly worded sentence. The triangle the triangle instrument is more clear on the S4 than it is on the 1990. And this is at -20 decibel on the S4, which is very loud, which is about equal loudness to -15, -14 on the 1990. And what I can tell you right now is that not only does the S4 present the triangle instrument cleaner and clearer, but it's more easily heard than it is on the 1990. So the 1990, I said it doesn't sound muffled. It's not that. It just sounds so far back in the mix, you can't pick it out. You can easily miss it. And so if I hadn't heard the S4 and if I hadn't found that instrument in our initial playthrough, I wouldn't have really noticed it on the 1990. I wouldn't have noticed it. And so that's one of the things you have to keep in mind, is that those nuanced instruments like a triangle are things that may not jump out to you with the 1990. And if you ever watch a video of a rehearsal of a concert, and the orchestra is just rehearsing in their big room, every once in a while they'll have somebody in the back who has the triangle. And his job is to hit the triangle every once in a while. Now, just imagine that small little instrument compared to big barrel drums, to wind instruments, to string instruments, to brass instruments with group sets of these people, right? Like 50 people in this big group and this one guy in the back with a cymbal, with this triangle. That's like the little engine who thought he could, right? I understand why headphones struggle to be able to bring that out, because it's such a minute sound in the mix. but the S4 brings it out better than the 1990. All right, so let's go on to Flight from the City by Johan Johansson. Let's bring down the volume to -30 again. Okay, we're at -30. I have the S4 still in my head. Here we go.
The PlayStation 4 is an 8th generation home video game console developed by Sony Interactive Entertainment.
Very loud at -30. You can clearly and cleanly hear the movement, the creaking of the piano bench as the pianist moves back and forth as he or she is seated. The piano decay is really smooth. You play it, it just reverberates very slowly, and it just fades away. There's no underlying rumble that continues on with each piano strike. I could hear the buzzing, the electrical buzz, very clearly, and it's cleanly separated from the piano frequency. There's also the synth sound in the background that I can hear that's clearly separated from everything. And now you have the cello that's playing, and the cello itself is also its own frequency. Everything has a very good hardline separation in the tonality. No harshness, no peakiness, no treble spikes that I can find. I'm going to increase the volume to -25. And it just makes this song come alive. At -25, it's that string instrument, the cello, is the volume that comes up. It just sounds so smooth. No distortion at all. The piano frequency, when they're pressing down on the piano, on the keys, it sometimes has this thump sound because the wood on wood contact, but that thumping sound, that bass sound, does not linger. It doesn't distort with the rest of the frequency. I could still cleanly hear the creaking of the bench even throughout the entire mix. Okay, let's switch to the 1990. I have the 1990 on my head, and I'm going to decrease the volume to -30. And let's go. As you can imagine, very quiet at -30 decibels. I'm going to increase the volume to -20. And at -20, there's a different tonality to the piano that there was with the S4, where the S4 has a bit more substance to the piano. It sounds a bit meatier, meaning the frequency has a slight, I wouldn't say boost, but it sounds more upfront than it does on the 1990. The 1990 has a much more subdued presentation of the piano. I could hear the buzzing of that electric sound effect. I can hear the synth sound in the background. Now the cello comes in. Sounds clear. Everything so far seems to have a good separation as well, just like with the S4. I'm going to increase the volume to -15. And with the 1990, when the piano keys are hit and it's wood-on-wood contact, that thumping lingers a little bit longer than it does on the S4. With the S4, it's a quick thump, and it just fades away. Whereas with the 1990, there's a wood-on-wood contact, there's the thump, and then it just kind of lingers just maybe half a second longer. It doesn't really distort any of the other frequencies. It's just something that stays. But this is something interesting. So let's stop. Let's go back to about around 1 minute and 50 seconds. What happens is that there's a stronger push down onto the keys, and it just sounds like somebody fell on the piano, right? It goes from That's the type of sound that the 1990 just made. So let's listen for that, stop, move back, switch on the S4 and see if this is the same presentation. So here we go. I'm starting at 144. Yeah, it's actually 148 that sound comes in. I'm going to switch to the S4. Okay, I've got the S4, and let's listen for that again. Yeah, so that sound is present on the S4, but it doesn't sound as thumpy, right? So 1 minute and 48 seconds, listen for that sound. That's the type of sensation presentation that the 1990 has. It's just a little bit more boosted than on the S4. The S4, it's very quick and it's just boom, and it moves on. It's not elevated, right? So that little bass bump. Whereas with the 1990, it is. It just sounds just a tiny bit different, and it's just boom, and it lasts a little bit longer, and it sounds a bit more prevalent, whereas the S4, it doesn't. I can say right now that with this song, neither headphone is peaky, neither headphone is harsh. The sound character is generally the same, and there are minor differences here and there. The creaking of the bench, I think it's cleaner and clearer on the S4 than it is on the 1990, though you can still hear it on the 1990. The only real difference, I would say, even though it's still a minor one, is that the 1990, when it reproduces the thumping of the keys, it has slightly more elevated presentation to that frequency than the S4 does. It's not a huge difference, it's not night and day, but it is noticeable when you do an A and B test. All right, so let's go to New Light by Kazuki. And as I've said before, New Light has layers and layers and layers and layers of detail. There are kids playing in the background. There's a sound of wind rustling through the grass. There's somebody who's walking on the grass. You should be able to hear them crunch, crunch, crunch. There's a piano. There's a guitar, acoustic guitar. And then there's this buzzing sensation in the background, buzzing noise in the background all the way at the bottom of the layers. So let's listen for all of that. We have the S4. Here we go. I can hear the kids all the way in the back. Very clear, no distortion. I can clearly hear the person walking on the grass. It's crunch, crunch, crunch of the grass under his feet. I could hear the wind rustling through the grass. I hear the piano and the guitar. Good separation of all the instruments. There's no melding of the frequencies so far. There's this rumbly effect at the background that is not prevalent in the S4. You can hear it, but it's quite muted, very well controlled. And if you just sit back, close your eyes, you'll listen for it, you can hear it. But unless you're very quiet, you may not really pick it up. It's in the mix, but it's not overpowering any of the other instruments. Let's increase the volume to negative 25. Crystal clear. No harshness, no treble spikes, no peakiness. Everything has an excellent separation. I hear multiple instruments at this point. There's a synth mix in here, the piano, the guitar. Everything is very well separated. Okay, so let's switch to the 1990. At the 1990 on my head, let's go. I'm going to increase to negative 20 decibels. I can hear the person crunching, walking on the grass. I can hear them crunching the grass underneath their feet. It's a little bit more muffled on the 1990 than on this S4, just a tiny bit. I'm going to increase the volume to -15. I could hear the kids in the background, but they sound more muted than they did on the S4. With the S4, much more clean presentation of those kids playing in the background. And there's just, and that rumbly effect in the background, it's just really distorting the song now. At this portion, around 55 seconds, it's like you put your face in front of a moving fan and you talk into the fan. The sound waves get vibrate because of the fan speed and the air coming towards your face. That's the type of sensation I'm getting with the 1990 at -20 decibels. Oh, -15 decibels, sorry. I'm going to increase to -10. No harshness, but there's clear distortion at this point because of that low rumble effect. I'm going to ratchet down the volume until I don't hear that distortion. -15, still hear it. -20, okay, no distortion anymore. But -20 and higher, you will hear that distortion, and it just falls apart around -10 decibels. I didn't hear that type of distortion at all with the S4, where the S4 just presented the rumble as rumble, and you could just pick it out in the background. The 1990 boosts that rumble, and then when you crank up the volume really loud, that rumble just starts distorting the song, just totally distorting the song. You can't pick out the rest of the mix, and it for me, the effect is not very pleasant to my ears, because what happens is that I feel like the air is being rushed in and out of my eardrums, and I don't like that. You may think it's totally fine. You may think that's how you like to hear the song. That's fine, but for me, that's a completely different presentation than the way the S4 presented the song, and it's just not flattering the way the 1990 does it at the higher volume. And this has been consistent. I have listened to this song with the 1990, with the 1770, with the T1, and with each one of those headphones of the Beyerdynamics, it does the exact same thing at -20 and higher. Exactly the same. And the only common denominator amongst those headphones is that they all are using the Tesla driver. And I know they have different tuning and everything, but that's the type of effect that I'm not hearing with any other headphone. Speaking specifically about the S4, I don't hear that type of distortion. I don't hear the distortion. Now, somebody might say, well, that's a detail. I don't think it's a detail when the whole song falls apart. That's not a detail. That's something wrong with the way that the song is presented on a particular pair of headphones. Okay, so let's talk about conclusions. What do I think? Well, here's the thing. I think that Ollo Audio makes some excellent headphones. And if you are in the market for, flat sounding headphones, neutral headphones, mixing and mastering headphones, you have the choice of the Beyerdynamics, and then you have the choice of the HD 700 and 800. And yes, there are other headphones out there that are also marketed as mixing and mastering headphones. I don't think that the Beyerdynamic headphones are mixing and mastering headphones. The 1770 certainly are not. The 1990 is not. It doesn't really provide the detail that you expect for a $600 pair of headphones. My bottom line about the 1990 has been that it provides average sound. I mean, it's good, but it doesn't deserve the $600 price tag, and it most certainly does not deserve the hype that some individuals have given to it. Let me put it in more concrete terms for you. The Ollo is half the price, and at the very least, with all of our tests, bass, mids, treble, the Ollo has performed the same as the 1990. Now, I think that it's outperformed the 1990 in some respects. The bass response, I think it was a bit more clean on the Ollo, but that was, we're cutting really thin there. The mids were more clear on the Ollo, better presentation, better separation than on the 1990. The treble, I think it's fairly obvious that the 1990 has that treble spike, and with certain songs, you get that harshness to the treble that simply doesn't exist with the Ollo audio when you compare the two. And that harshness might be the real deal breaker for people. You may say to yourself, if the bass response is really kind of tiny, I don't really care. Or I really do want a slight teeny tiny bump in the bass like the 1990. Fine. You might say, look, I don't really want my mids too up front. I don't really care if they're uber separated. I just want to be able to listen to the mids. And I like the way that you're describing the 1990. Fantastic. But you cannot escape from the fact that the 1990 has a treble spike. And you cannot escape from the fact that it can get very ear-piercing and very, very uncomfortable for some people. The thing that I think is the real deal breaker overall, when you compare these two, is that the 1990 has a distortion with New Light. Now, you might say, I will never listen to New Light, and this song will never affect my life. That may be. But you may have a song in your collection that has whatever it is that New Light has in its mix, and the 1990 at higher volume will distort. And that's not what a reference headphone, a mixing and mastering headphone is supposed to do. You're not supposed to struggle with it. The tool that you have shouldn't be worked on so that you can actually use it. Does that kind of make sense? You don't go to a hardware store and buy a drill and come home and then tinker with the drill so that you can use it. That's a total waste of money. You don't go buy a car and then come back and then you tinker with the car, fix the engine, get under the hood and take out some tubes, put in new tubes, whatever it is that the engines are made of, I don't know, so that you can drive the car. That's not reasonable, right? So if you're going to a store and you're spending $50 to $100 for a drill, and knowing that you got to take the drill home and you got to fix it so that you can actually use it, why would anybody spend $50 or $100? In the same sense, if you're going to spend $600 for a pair of headphones, but you know that pair of headphones is going to have a treble spike and you're going to have to EQ, or you may want to modify the headphones in some way to tame that EQ or tame that spike, then is it really worth it for you to spend the $600? Now the answer might be yes. Some people like tinkering with things. Some people really do like the sound of the 1990 and can live with the treble response, or they think I can just EQ it a couple of decibels on my computer. Fine, no problem. But I think the vast majority of individuals who just want a good pair of headphones, they don't want to keep spending money, this is something that they really should consider. This isn't something that you can excuse and say, it's one or two songs. No. There is a definite spike, and it will get harsh. If the only thing you ever listen to is raindrops on Spotify, just the drops of rain on leaves, then hey, you will never have a problem. But you can wear any headphones for that. The reason you buy the 1990 is because you want to hear the detail, and you want to hear the separation, and you want to be able to mix and master, right? And that's the marketing. But if you can't use the headphones until you tinker with them, then that's extra time and effort and frustration that goes into owning that particular product. Overall, I think that the S4 is an excellent option when you compare it with the 1990. The S4 is not an amazing headphone. I've never said that it's an amazing headphone. But the fact that it's half the price of the 1990 and at the very least keeps pace shoulder to shoulder with it, and in my opinion outpaces the 1990 in certain respects, you have to stop yourself and go, okay, what's the issue here? Either I'm totally biased, my shtick is unbiased, but I'm totally biased towards the Ollo for some strange reason, or my listening methodology is totally wrong. Okay, you can say that. Or looking at the scientific data that we have from the reference chart, response chart, and going through the songs as methodically as we have been, and telling you exactly when things start getting spiky and when things start falling apart, you could say that maybe I'm right. Those are your three options. You cannot escape, as I said, some of the downfalls of the 1990. It's a good headphone. It's a decent headphone, but it's most certainly not worth $600, nor is it worth the hype that people have given to it. The Ollo audio in comparison of the 1990, in conclusion, I think is probably the choice for somebody who wants something that's unique, handmade, okay? Something that's unique, something that's comfortable, something that has at least the same performance as the 1990 at half the price. I hope that this has been of some help. If you've been considering buying the 1990, if you've been watching these videos, look, there are a lot of options out there for you. And I hope that I provided some more thought that you can use in order to make a wise decision, whichever decision that you make. I thank you so much for watching my channel. I thank you so very much for commenting and contributing to this channel, because it's because of all of you that we've made it to over 500 subscribers. We are now at 522 as of today, and that's fantastic. Thank you so much to each and every one of my subscribers. If you like my content, if you enjoy what I do, then please do consider donating to me a little bit on Patreon. I currently have 8 fantastic, wonderful, very giving patrons who give me a little bit of their hard-earned money once a month. If you could join their ranks, I would truly appreciate it. Joining their ranks means that I get to save up a little bit more money because of your help to buy other products and test them thoroughly so that I can give you a true experience about how these things sound, how these things perform. If you are a viewer but you haven't subscribed, hey, think about subscribing. I really do want to get to that 600 number now that we're at this 522. Thank you so much once again for joining me. Thank you so much for commenting. If you have a request for me to review a product, then please look at the review request form below in the description. I hope all of you have a wonderful, amazing, great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.